What would some of those key measures be, just specifically? What would you look at for a teen athlete?
Well, first of all, their adaptability. So can they adapt? Are they quick adapters?
Meaning, can they learn something and do it
Yeah,
quickly?
can they take a skill and can they be shown the skill and do it quickly? I think that's in terms of just being an athlete, that's the number one thing I would look for. Can they take instruction? So are they coachable, right? I want to be able to work with a kid who can do movement well and learn quickly, to also be able to be coached on that as well. And then I think as you're looking at physical fitness, I mean, there's numerous physical fitness tests. I think the big ones for CrossFit is just number one, being able to move well first as a youth athlete. So can they squat, can they push, can they pull, and then doing capacity tests to a degree and determining aerobic and lactic endurance and alactic.
It's interesting that you haven't mentioned something like number of chest to bar pull-ups or number of muscle-ups that a kid can do. I mean,
Right.
why aren't those on the top of your list?
Yeah, because that's not the foundation to development of a youth CrossFitter. I mean, to me, I want to know what's under that base. I don't care if you can do 100 kipping pull-ups. Can you do one strict pull-up?
Why does that matter?
Because the longevity for that development of the athlete. If I'm building a house on top of sand, that house isn't going to stand a chance, right? But if I'm building a house on top of a solid concrete ground, I know it has a chance to stay for a while, right? So in youth development, it's prevalent in all sports too, but at CrossFit you see it very clearly. The fast tracking and I can swing and I can kip and I can do this and now so I can get to the next level and I can go to the games, whatever the goals are. Without thinking about, like, at the age of 17, 18, what these kids' shoulders are going to look like, because they haven't developed the tendon strength or the tenacity in the muscle to do work or add load over time.
I know that we've seen a lot of videos come in of younger athletes doing kipping pull-ups where it just looks like 10 times body weight just ripping into those tendons.
I know, yeah, Mike has a few girls as well, and he's shown some videos at the coaches meetings, and it's just brutal. I mean, there's no development. There needs to be some type of foundational build for this athlete to get them ready and to get them prepared to do the dynamic work. That just makes sense.
So do you think that that's potentially, even more so on the female side, do you think that that's why gymnastics is such a good baseline for some of these female athletes, is because they just get so structurally strong?
Yeah, I mean, look at the girls who are successful now, or the males that are successful now. They didn't come right into CrossFit. They had a huge, long career somewhere else where they developed the repetition, they developed the strength and the endurance to handle the volume and load. Now, those are the ones that came through and actually had a career in CrossFit because they had that base from somewhere at least, right? And now it's to the point, I think at this day and age, is like, well, what does that base look like for a kid who started CrossFit at 7 years old? And what should we as educators and parents and leaders in the community be teaching these kids at this age? Should we be teaching them a kipping pull-up because it's so cool? Or should we actually be, educated and understanding, like, no, these kids need to do A, B, and C, of strict work before they do this dynamic work so they can at least enjoy that.
What's so interesting is that you see it in adults a lot where somebody comes into the gym, they have 25 strict pull-ups, and then you say, okay, do a kipping pull-up, and 10 seconds later they're doing repetition kipping pull-ups, but then somebody has no strict pull-ups and they can do 3 kipping pull-ups and that's all that they do. They never build an actual base.
Yep.
But you don't necessarily see that as much at the kids level, where it doesn't seem like the base ever gets built.
Never.
So what is a base? I mean, what does a base need to be for a kid? And I know that that's not an exact answer, but what are some of the important pieces for safety or longevity in the sport?
Yeah. Well, let's look at the components of the sport first, right? So what are the skills required? And number one, if we know as coaches what's how to build speed and power, first of all, you have to have absolute strength. So the absolute strength build for these kids is number one. In and out first of being able to move correctly. So teaching the movement, teaching the skill, whether that's through an actual knee flexion or hip flexion, or whether that's through a carry, whatever that that's determined basically on their continuum where they're sitting in their own development. But there needs to be, first of all, movement, then strength, and then muscle endurance. So we're moving strength into muscle endurance for these kids without first going to speed strength on the opposite side of the continuum, right? Which is completely messed up in my mind, and then trying to move them backwards into strength.
So something like a kipping pull-up would be more speed strength as
Absolutely.
opposed to strict pull-up as an absolute strength.
Absolutely.